Then I felt a thump on my back, and the next thing I know, I'm being thrown into a pond. Ah! I heard a splash, and my whole body was in the pond. I panicked, but the pond was shallow, so I could easily get to my feet. My mother-in-law was laughing hysterically when she saw me soaking wet. "It's too bad it's so shallow." My name is Jake. I am a 32-year-old house husband. I have been married to my wife Alice for 2 years. I met my wife at work when I was transferred to a new department. She was my trainer and taught me how to do my job. She was very cool because she was reliable and good at her job. She took me out for dinner and drinks when she was worried about me being alone after moving departments. She listened to me. That kind of caring was also very important to me. After a few more meals, I started asking her out on dates, and we started dating. We got married about 2 years after we started dating. My wife said she wanted me to be a stay-at-home husband to focus on her career. I decided to retire and become a full-time house husband. From then on, I worked hard as a housewife to support my wife. I think our newlywed life was happy. My wife always came home on time and told me my cooking was delicious. On weekends, we went on drives and trips and made many memories. I was sure that our happy days would continue forever, or so I thought. It was only recently that I began to feel a shadow creep over this happy life. It was when my father-in-law became ill and passed away. My wife suggested we move in with her mother because she felt sorry for her after my father-in-law passed away. I honestly didn't want to live with her because I didn't like my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law loves her only daughter. She seemed to think that I had taken her daughter away from her, and she has always been hostile towards me. When I went to visit my parents-in-law, she would smile at my wife and talk to her, but she would look at me coldly, as if I was trash. "I don't approve of you, you know?" She would whisper those words in my ears when we were unexpectedly alone in the kitchen. I can't live with my mother-in-law, who clearly hates me. I didn't think it would be possible for me to live with her, so I told my wife that I thought it would be difficult for us to live together. My wife, being my wife, said, "My mom wants to move in with us. She's willing to step up to the plate." As she made it sound like I was being selfish, I had no choice but to live with my mother-in-law who hates me. I told her that she was bullying me, but she didn't believe me. "My mom is a bully? She's not the kind of person who would do something like that. My mom said she always wanted a son too, so try to get along with her." My wife asked me to do so, and I ended up agreeing to live with her. But this was the beginning of hell. She said, "Jake, the water's too cold. Make it hotter. You haven't cleaned the toilet yet. You really are a slow learner, and your food is always the same. You're a lousy cook. Is there a single good thing about you? What kind of upbringing did you have? I wonder what kind of upbringing it takes to make a loser like you." It was some really rude things to say. To me, it's like, I'd like to see the look on your parents' faces if they heard you saying those things to me. "And what's with that look on your face? Do you have a problem with me?" No. I didn't rebel at first, just did as my mother-in-law said. I thought she would get tired of picking on me, but my mother-in-law is the type of person who is so clingy, just like super glue. She never stopped picking on me. I gradually lost patience and began to talk back. "Your food is disgusting. Did you feed this to Alice when you were newlyweds? I can't believe it." "Then, can you cook and show me how it's done? Tonight's dinner. Why don't you cook dinner without saying anything to Alice? If she then says it's very tasty, I'll admit that your cooking is better than mine." My mother-in-law didn't think I would provoke her like that. Her pride didn't seem to allow her to run away from a fight, so she took the bait. "Fine, watch me. I'll show you that I'm better than you." With that, my mother-in-law began to cook with her nose stuck in the air. I was looking forward to seeing how it would turn out. It had been a long time since I had spent a leisurely time without cooking. Then my wife came home, and we were eating. My mother-in-law was fidgeting while pretending to be normal, trying not to get caught. Then my wife said to me while we were eating, "The seasoning of dinner is a little off today, isn't it? It doesn't taste as good than usual. That's unusual for you." That's what my wife said. My mother-in-law's eyes widened in surprise. I struck a macho pose in my head. I tried to explain, "Well, actually, today." And then my mother-in-law cut in, "Right! You have to get your shit together, Jake. You're a house husband. You have to be able to cook a good meal," she said. No. You made it yourself," I thought, but I didn't want to be bothered with responding to her every time. Above all, my mother-in-law must have been the most frustrated to hear her daughter say such a thing, so I looked at my mother-in-law and grinned. I said to her, "I'm sorry, I guess I'm feeling kind of out of sorts today." The look of frustration on my mother-in-law's face at the time is funny to remember now. And then, I started talking back to my mother-in-law when I thought I couldn't stand it anymore. My mother-in-law would get upset and angry every time I talked back to her. I don't get upset by things easily, so I only confronted people when it got too much for me to handle. Then, my mother-in-law became more and more moody and began locking herself in her room all day. Well, that meant I didn't have to deal with her as much, so I was very thankful for that. But then my wife came home from work and said she wanted to talk to me. "What's going on?" My wife came to me to talk. She said she's being harassed by you. What? She said you told her not to come out of her room, so she's been locking herself in her room. Wait a minute, she's just staying in there on her own. I didn't say anything. Really? She seemed to be having a difficult time. She called me on my lunch break. No way. Then my mother-in-law came into the living room. "It's okay, Alice. There's a certain chemistry between people. I guess that means I'm not a good match for you, but I wanted to be friends with my son-in-law. I thought I was going to have the son I always wanted." Saying that, my mother-in-law held her eyes with her hands and started to cry. I'm sure it was a false cry, but it seemed to be effective against my wife. "Mom, I'm sorry I didn't realize it earlier. Jake, that's a little awful. I didn't think you were such a mean person." Wait a minute, you never listened to me at all. Why would my mother sound so distraught while lying? I'm the one who's getting the brunt of your mother's abuse. I'm the victim here. I tried so hard to tell her that, but she didn't believe me. There's no way I'm an abuser. Alice, you understand, don't you? Oh, that's right. There's no way my mother would do such a thing. Jake, you need to reflect a little on your behavior. Mom, if you ever need to talk to me again, don't hesitate, okay? Thanks, Alice. You're the only one I can count on. My mother-in-law had definitely succeeded in getting my wife on her side. It made me feel depressed that my wife didn't trust me at all. Just as my mother-in-law dotes on my wife, I think my wife also has a bit too much love for her mother. And from then on, my mother-in-law's abuse got worse. As if she had a huge bag of tricks, she made me do more and more chores, and every time I did something, she'd complain with a smug look on her face. I thought that was really out of character, and if I said anything back to her, she would tell my wife. Then my wife would just get angry at me. I started to think that I had enough of living like this. Divorce was the first thing that came to mind, and then something unexpected happened. That's when my wife and mother-in-law forced me out of the house. My mother-in-law wanted to buy something, so she made me drive the car. I thought, why not let my wife drive? She'd say, "My daughter is tired from work and didn't want to make her drive." My wife would get mad at me if I refused. I had no choice but to comply. Then, on my way home from shopping, we passed by a park. My mother-in-law suddenly said, "I'd love to walk in nature." I wanted to go home right away, and my wife said, "Well, let's go for a little walk." She motioned for me to pull into the parking lot. I said, "I'll wait here." My mother-in-law said, "You're coming too, you no-for-good fool." My wife also ordered me to get out of the car. My mom wants us to walk with her. I'm going to get in trouble again if I mess up here, so I just obey quietly. And while we were taking a walk in the park, I lazily followed my wife and mother-in-law. We found a duck in the pond. My mother-in-law said, "That's so cute," and approached it, so my wife went over there too. I took a step back and watched. My mother-in-law said, "You should get a closer look too." My wife said, "Come on," so I had no choice but to go closer and look at the ducks. Then my mother-in-law said, "Look, you should get even closer." She stepped back a little and led me in front of her. Then I felt a thump on my back, and I realized that I had been pushed into the pond. Ah! Splash! My whole body was in the pond. I panicked, but the pond was shallow, so I easily get to my feet. My mother-in-law was laughing hysterically when she saw me soaking wet. "Too bad it's surprisingly shallow." My wife laughed along with her. The ducks were so startled that they all ran away. Unbelievable. I can't believe you can laugh after doing this to me. How terrible of a human are you? I made up my mind at this point to absolutely divorce my wife and get out of that house. From then on, I was busy preparing for the divorce. It was very difficult to get a lawyer with my mother-in-law always around. If I spent too much time out of the house, she would say I was cheating on my wife. She'd report me to my wife and I'd get yelled at. On the other hand, if I stay home and make phone calls, she might eavesdrop on my calls and it would be troublesome. So I had to be very careful, and it was taking a lot longer than I thought it would. That's when it happened. One weekend during the holiday weekend, my mother-in-law and my wife said to me, "We're going on a trip to Okinawa right now, so you're going to have to stay at home," they told me. "I don't want to pay for your airfare and hotel. If you want to come, you'll have to pay your own way." My mother-in-law said that with a smirk on her face, but for me, it was the perfect timing. I could make all kinds of preparations while they were away. I suppressed my joy and played the part of being sad. "Well, I'll be staying at home then. Please enjoy yourself." My mother-in-law, with a look of triumph on her face, "Just make sure you clean up after yourself," she said, and left with my wife. Then I immediately called a lawyer and went through all the details. I actually had audio recordings of all the conversations my mother-in-law had with me when she had been badgering me, and I also recorded conversations when my wife wouldn't take my side at all. These seemed to be pretty valid evidence. The lawyer said, "With all this, it's enough to get a divorce, with the other side being in the wrong," he said. But then it happened. Out of the blue, I got a call from the hospital. To my surprise, my mother-in-law and my wife had a fender bender while driving and were badly injured. Now, they'd both been rushed to the hospital, and they wanted me to come over immediately. I rushed to the hospital. They were both bandaged up like mummies, and my mother-in-law was asleep. Jake, you came." "Are you okay, Alice? What happened? An accident?" "My mother and I were checking out the restaurants in the area we were going to visit, and we got confused. It was a red light, and I started to drive." I'm so dumbfounded. It was totally their fault. I listened to the story in detail. I was relieved to hear that the other side of the fender bender was mostly unharmed. If the other side had been seriously injured by such a stupid thing, I still felt sorry for them. My wife seemed to be very depressed because of her mother's injuries. "Mom's injuries seem to be quite severe. She's paralyzed and in need of care." The word caregiver gave me chills more than my mother-in-law's injury. "I see. So, Jake, please take care of my mother." What in the world was she talking about? She is the one who caused the serious injury. You should be responsible for taking care of her. I was absolutely dumbfounded by my wife, whose thought process was crazy to no end. And then my mother-in-law and my wife came home from the hospital. As for me, I feel like the time has finally come for me to ask my wife for a divorce. My wife is all healed up and she's fine, but my mother-in-law is really in need of nursing care. We had to do a lot of preparation, like getting her a special bed and a wheelchair. "Well then, take good care of my mother." My wife said that and left everything to me and went to work. I was stunned at how selfish she really was. I never saw her face again, so it didn't matter. I saw my wife off and started packing my own stuff, and that's when my mother-in-law called me loudly from the bed in her room. I ignored her for a while and packed my stuff. She kept yelling, so I had no choice but to go. You're finally here. Do you know how long I've been calling you for? I've lost my voice." "I'm sorry, I've been preoccupied with other things. So what the hell do you want?" "I have to go to the bathroom." "What?" "I have to go to the bathroom. I'm gonna pee my pants." "Oh, the bathroom." I said this to my mother-in-law, who sat in bed with a big smile on her face. "Sure, go to the bathroom." My mother-in-law's eyes widened in surprise. "Oh, wait, what do you mean? Why don't you take me to the bathroom?" "No, I don't want to. Why would I do that?" "Don't be silly. You'll make Alice angry again." "Yes, I'm sure she will be angry, but it's none of my business." "What?" "I'm divorcing Alice." "What?" "I'm leaving now, so I can't take care of you." "Oh no, wait a minute. If you leave now, who will take care of me? Stay here. Don't talk nonsense about divorce." It's amazing that you can still yell at me like that. On the contrary, I respect you, but I'm not going to be your caregiver. Do you know how much pain you have caused me? You pushed me into the pond. That's a serious assault charge. I could have called the police. "Hey, I was just messing with you. Stop exaggerating." You're not a human being if you can call that an overreaction. You are a scumbag. I'm going to ask you for alimony after the divorce for all the emotional pain I've suffered. "Oh no, I'm sorry. I apologize for everything I've done." "Oh, you can apologize to me, can you? But I'll never forgive you," I said, and got ready to leave the house and grab my luggage. "Jake, wait! Don't leave me alone! I can't go to the bathroom! I'll pee my pants!" "It's alright, I've called a helper." "What? Why didn't you tell me that sooner, you piece of shit?" "Look, you're not sorry about anything, are you?" "Oh no, this is different." "That's enough. I'm definitely getting a divorce. Well then." Oh, hey, when will the helpers be here? From about 3 p.m., as I recall. When the helpers would come was much later than my mother-in-law expected, leaving her shocked and in despair. I think she peed herself. My mother-in-law looked lifeless from embarrassment and humiliation. I left the house, leaving my mother-in-law like that. Then wrote to my wife, "There are divorce papers on the table. Please fill them out. I don't want to have any more conversations with you, so please go through your lawyer for all subsequent correspondence," I said in a note to her. Sure enough, I got a phone call after phone call from my wife, but I ignored them all. Then I went through my lawyer. I asked my wife for a divorce and compensation for the emotional pain from my mother-in-law. I heard that his wife refused to divorce up until the end. She finally accepted the divorce after deciding she couldn't win in court due to too much evidence. My ex-wife paid alimony to me, and she had to hire a helper to take care of my mother-in-law. Her life became difficult all at once. My in-laws started cursing my ex-wife, saying, "It's your fault that I'm in this situation." My ex-wife also said, "If you hadn't abused Jake, we wouldn't have gotten divorced." They're fighting every day, and both of them are mentally exhausted. My ex-wife sent me an email with such rambling account of these fights, I erased them and blocked all her contacts. I, on the other hand, have set up a job and a new house while my ex-wife and ex-mother-in-law were in the hospital. I've been able to live on my own with no problems. Now, for the first time in a long time, I'm a working person and have a corporate job. I'm having a very enjoyable and fulfilling time. I'm thinking about finding a new hobby while I'm working hard for a while.